Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name's JP Nurbit, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Nate Sanderson. Since I started this podcast back in 2017, its mission has been to share practical ideas to help you grow as a leader and improve your team's culture. If you find value in these episodes, you might want to head on over to tocculture.com to learn more about our one-on-one coaching program, online courses, and my books, most recently, The Culture System. Everything we offer is to help coaches to become more transformational and to create an extraordinary culture. Also, in the details of this episode, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter to get the notes to this and every episode. Now, today is the second half of our conversation with Ryan Hawk, the host of the Learning Leader podcast and the author of The Pursuit of Excellence. Last week, we talked about what the pursuit of excellence actually is, and this week, we talk about pursuing excellence with others. We dive into how we can develop leaders within our team, help athletes who struggle with confidence, and we can discuss obstacles to our own growth. But before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you of the Culture System online training platform. If you want to become a more transformational coach and build a great team culture, then you need to check it out. You can learn the Culture System framework at your own pace with this one-of-a-kind online training platform. I'm your guide throughout the course, and I work with you to deepen your commitment to transformational coaching and to teach you the proven methods, tools, and strategies of the best teams and organizations in the world. In this course, you'll get access to customizable digital tools and a group chat to engage with experienced coaches as you move through the four-part framework of the Culture System. You'll also be inspired and transformed through the stories and lessons of real leaders who've made changes in their leadership and successfully applied these methods and tools within their organizations. To get the course, go to tocculture.com and then click on online courses. You can get the access for yourself, for your coaching staff, or for your whole entire athletic department or club. Remember, just head on over to tocculture.com. All right, let's get right into the second half of our conversation with Ryan Hawk.
Well, I want to ask you this question. One of the things, so JP and I do one-on-one individual mentorship with coaches, college coaches, high school coaches, and lots of different sports. I mostly work with basketball coaches, but you'd be surprised. There are familiar complaints across the spectrum here from coaches about things that they run into. And one of those is developing leaders on their teams. And, how often do you hear somebody saying, I would assume this probably happens in the business world as well, but in coaching, it's, when this senior class is gone, or we just don't have any leaders on our team this year, and therefore we don't focus in practice, or whatever the consequences of that are. And I think sometimes coaches' response to that is, in terms of developing leaders, is let's bring some guys in a room and let's read a book and let's talk about leadership. And hopefully that spurs them into becoming better leaders. What we've found as we've sort of experimented with this, and I'm curious about your perspective on this, is we don't talk about leadership as much with our developing leaders as just giving them opportunities to experience leadership and tiptoe their, foot into the water a little bit, and eventually participating in a lot of conversations very similar to what you talked about with your background scheming with coach about you taking the brunt of some criticism in practice for the benefit of the team. Just bringing our players into the conversation about leadership and then helping them to have opportunity to make decisions seems to be a way to develop them more than just reading about leadership. But I don't know what your experience was like as a quarterback. Obviously, leadership is required in that position. What are your thoughts for coaches trying to develop kids into better leaders?
Well, I mean, I've played on winning teams and losing teams. I've played on teams where that we excelled and grew as people, and ones where we didn't probably as much. And one of the biggest differences is that the player-led teams, where the players had a standard and held each other accountable far more than the coaches, just did better. So I think coaches, it's creating the environment for that to flourish. How can I create an environment for our players to take ownership over all of that? I was more scared and intimidated by the older guys when I was a freshman and a sophomore than I was of any coach, even though the coaches were intimidating guys too, a lot of military background, stuff like that. But it was the players who took ownership over that. So it's like creating and fostering and empowering an environment where players can do that. And I think including them, bringing them in, seeking feedback, having conversations where you're leading with trust makes the players feel more of like owners instead of just employees, if you're going to use that analogy. And I think so. Again, there are a lot. I try to do the same in the sales world, in the business world, of having your core group. It wasn't everybody, but your core group, that they were on the inside of everything. I was fully transparent on pretty much everything I was doing, how I thought, what I wanted us to do. I asked for their feedback. I would implement things that they said. I would then give them kind of, hey, you're going to be in charge of mentoring here. You're going to be in charge of this product here. You're going to be in charge. You're going to run the meeting on this specific thing that we're going to do. I'll announce it. I'll open it, but then it's your show. And giving them full trust. You also let them, like, they're going to mess up sometimes, and you got to be there to say, it's okay, I got you. And here's how we're going to bounce back from messing up, not letting them like feel like, oh, I got to walk on eggshells because I can't make a mistake. So to me, I think those player-led teams were built by coaches who created a foundation, a place where people felt safe to take ownership of the team. And then they certainly had to hold themselves accountable, but then also held others accountable. Yeah, I mean, it was just awesome to be a part of those teams and eventually be one of those guys myself as a player, and then try to create the same environment in the business world. It's not easy. It takes a long time. It takes trust. It takes hiring and developing the right people, like all these things. It's not just an overnight thing, but I think when you get that going, it can be pretty sweet.
Yeah, and one of the phrases that we've used, I was just having a conversation yesterday kind of about our program and just the way we built things in my second year where I'm at here. And we use the phrase co-creating with our players. We find out what they want their experience to be like. And then we're working together in conversation and action to try to build that thing together. And surprisingly, I think that is a unique approach in the sports world, and maybe outside of that as well, because it does require the coach to have some vulnerability and to maybe loosen the reins of control and some of those kind of things when you're bringing players or employees into that process.
You're right. Yeah, I think that's the key part, right? Is that you have to give some. You have to bestow responsibility on others. I remember having Steve Wojciechowski on my show and asking him, like, what makes Coach K great? Because he was an assistant before he became a head coach, and a lot of guys have gone from being an assistant from Coach K to head coaches. And he said because of how much he empowered us as assistants to have full ownership over certain elements of the game plan, of side out of bounds plays, the defense we're going to play against this specific team, whatever it may be. He's like, he gave us full ownership. And then during the game, we are the lead coach on that specific thing that we own. Same thing with players. I think you can do some of that. So yeah, I just think those are like, it doesn't need to be a dictatorship. In fact, if it is, I don't know if that's sustainable over time. It's more about like, can we build a sustainable structure of a team of people of trust, and always also being on the lookout for like who's next, who are the next people that we could start maybe pushing outside of where they're currently comfortable, giving them more responsibility, maybe even more than they think they can handle right now to help them progress. That's another, I think, a mark of a good coach, is they're willing to push a little bit and get the next people ready to go.
And that was the next thing I wanted to ask you about, just again, kind of thinking back to your playing days. And you even mentioned there, as a freshman and sophomore, your role is more as a follower, but then you're growing into that leadership role as you become an upperclassman and obviously move on in your career. What was the process like for you of finding your voice as a leader on your teams?
It started from my coaches. After my freshman year, I didn't say a word. I mean, I started and played as a freshman. We're a Division I school in Ohio, big school, big tradition. Nobody ever done that before. And so I was so intimidated that I literally would call the play, I would call the cadence, and that was pretty much all I said. Wouldn't do much else because I just felt it's not my place. I haven't earned it, all of that. But in between the freshman and sophomore year, I remember Coach Greg Enolary sat me down and said, that's not enough. You got to do more. You can't just execute the offense, especially as a quarterback. You have to find your voice, and it's got to be authentic and genuine. Don't just yell or speak up because you think a quarterback does that. You have to genuinely find and pick your spots and your moments where you get on a guy or you give big support, right? That's got to be part of what you do, like taking ownership. We want this to be your team. We trust you. We believe in you. We want you to kind of take ownership of this team. And so that part of that is doing the hard things, and it can impact relationships, especially when you're immature high school kids. It can really impact relationships if all of a sudden you start kind of saying, hey, like, I'm going to try to play and hold myself to this level, and I'm going to expect you to too. And when you don't, or especially if you don't give effort or maximum effort, or your attitude isn't in line, that we're going to have a conversation. That's tough, but I think it was a great experience for me to develop some leadership qualities early on when I didn't really know how to do that. But then pushing me, saying, you got to find that. That's part of this. I thought was just really helpful. And again, another example of leaders pushing and helping bring others along to take ownership as part of the team. It's better than just having that be this kind of dictator-like led system with the coaching staff.
Yeah, I think so often the trap we fall into as a leader is just, we think it's just, hey, tell them what to do, and then we expect them to do what we say. And what you're talking about and Nate's talking about here is, and these words empowerment, they can be a little bit overdone. But I mean, I love this one phrase that I heard Owen Eastwood say before, which is, we as the leader, we have to sketch the vision, but we allow the people to color it in, and I think that's a really powerful way to say, hey, they have opportunity to talk about what this might look like, what this practice might look like, and instead of it just coming from us and us dictating. And I think this kind of leads to a question I want to ask you about, because you've talked with so many leaders, and there's as we talked about earlier, we want to have integrity. There's values that we want to stick to. There's things that we want to, stand by. But then also great leadership is about making decisions that sometimes are to pivot, to change course. I believe in the book you talk about Guy Kawasaki at Apple, and how, like, Apple at first was like, we're only going to develop on Safari, I think it was, and then they made a big pivot there to open it up to other people to develop their products. And I think sometimes, like, we can be stubborn as leaders, and so I'm just curious, from your perspective, what's the difference between stubborn leaders and people that are just convicted in their principles, and then when they and also aware enough to know when they need to make changes?
Yeah, you probably heard the phrase, strong beliefs weakly held. I think I admire leaders who have an open mind to evolve and update and change their mind when better evidence presents itself. I think when it comes to your values and being convicted of, like, this is your code, that's one thing. And usually those, once you get pretty clear on those, they probably are going to stay consistent. But when it comes to tactics or ideas or ways to get things accomplished, or how we're going to execute, to having an open mind to changing maybe how we practice. Things evolve. We've learned a bit more about bodies. We learn more about people. We're going to actually tweak how we go about it. I mean, I played in the days when our punishment, if we weren't playing well, was just they took the water off the field. Now, a coach would, if you did that, Nate, like, you took the water out of the gym, you'd get fired, right? That day, you'd probably get fired that night. You can't do that. That used to be just normal. It was fine for coaches to punish you by taking the water off the field when you're wearing full pads and it's 95 degrees in August. So, but those coaches have evolved. They've understand, how do we get our players? And Coach Allers, I just had dinner with him a month ago talking about this. I go, like, do you still do all that kind of crazy stuff? He's like, oh my God, it's so different now. It's so different when it comes to helping our players peak for Friday night. Like, the way when we wear pads, how long we practice, hydration, all of it's different. The best ones, certainly they have principles in their code, but they're also willing to update and evolve as they learn more. Like, right, if better evidence presents itself, we will change. And I think that's the ones who are just stubborn to say, like, this is the way, I'm never changing no matter what. I don't know, man. The only constant in the world is change. So we have to be willing to update and evolve with that. Not saying, like, our principles are going to always be changing, but maybe our tactics and our style of execution will be updated as we go.
Yeah, and this is huge, I think, because first off, some people aren't changing, or they're changing so slow. They're changing with resentment. But your story of Coach Allery here is brilliant, because so often when we're presented with other evidence of ways of doing things, we as coaches, because I say this from personal experience, we as coaches, we as leaders say, are they telling me that I'm doing a bad job, like that I'm a bad coach. And it's no, it's not that I was ever doing anything bad. It's just that there are better ways of doing things, as, you know, things evolve, people change, but also as we get more information about what is the best way to do things, best practices around hydration, and we get, you know, more creative about other ways to develop mental toughness and resilience in athletes than, you know, those type of tactics, you know. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of leaders are just, they put up those walls because they think, oh, it's to change is to say that the way I was doing it was bad or wrong.
Yeah. Well, part of the issue with this is, especially in the political landscape, when people get called flip-floppers or things like that. I mean, I almost don't even want to pay attention to that stuff, because like Abraham Lincoln would have been called that. And I think he'd probably go down in history as one of the greatest leaders of all time, but he's certainly updated his thoughts and changed his minds about some very serious issues. So I think when you like study history and historical figures from a leadership perspective, the great ones certainly update their thinking. They evolve. They change at times. That's just something I think about with. I mean, Adam Grant's recent book called "Think Again." That the whole book's about that, right? And I think that's something for us as leaders to be thinking about: is when's the last time I changed my mind, or what's something that maybe I believe that others think is crazy that I have an open mind about, though. I think those things are just interesting topics for us as leaders to be thinking about. Our coaches too, they would, every offseason, they would go study college coaches. They would study their programs. They weren't doing that to say, oh, we're perfect, we got it down, right? We're not changing anything. The reason they would go to college spring practices and watch how they do everything was because they wanted to get better. They wanted to say, oh, we never thought of that. Now we're going to have, this is how we're going to segment our practice. This is the order we're going to go. This is what we're going to do to help our players be in better position to do well when it's game day. So I think like that's the other cool thing, is when you see your coaches going to spend time with others who are doing it well, that's them basically embedding this growth mindset into how they behave as leaders, so that we should be behaving the same way. Like no matter what happens, we're gonna identify people who are excellent at what they do and go study from them and see whatever we can learn to then update and implement into our program. I think the best ones, that's what they do.
And I even add to that, I think the best ones step out of their sport in coaching.
Yeah.
Because they move to other sports and other fields. That's a real sign of looking for growth. You've got children, so my question for you here is: you played high level football, and now you've got all this experience. These years later is on leadership, culture. What would you like to see change from your own athletic experience for your own kids' athletic experience? Because this podcast is about, you know, really helping to transform lives, you know, create a healthy environment for young people today in sports. And so you've spent a lot of time talking about all the great things about your athletic experience, but I'm sure there are certain things about your athletic experience, or maybe what you observe in today's. So what do you hope to see change, or something that a coach could change within his own team?
I feel pretty lucky in that regard that our girls have had pretty good experiences so far. The one part that I still need to probably learn more about is just the way the culture is more, it seems at least, is set up now, is more of kind of like taking a picture of yourself all the time, or looking. I watch high school basketball games and sometimes notice players know where the Instagram, especially at Centerville, it's one of the best programs in the country. So there are multiple cameramen on the court every game to put clips on Instagram, and the guys know where those people are, and I see them kind of pointing and looking after a dunk or something like that. To me, maybe that makes us sound old. I don't know, but to me, that part of it is more me focused and less we focused. So I just think as a coach myself for my daughter's basketball team, we just try to focus, me and you know, my other coach, we just try to focus on being like, what does it mean to be a great teammate? How can we be there for one another? How can we play good help defense, right? How can we pass to get a better shot than the one that we currently got? Like how to set each other up, how to how to pick somebody else up when they fall down, like literally and figuratively. How can we be there for them? That's what I try to focus on, and I think that's because that's what I was taught. But yeah, I guess I don't know I have a great answer of like what's not well, other than at times seeing some of the focus on me, and I think part of that is just the way kids seem to communicate is taking weird Snapchat pictures of their face and or the side of their face or something, and then sending it. Like, I know it makes us sound old, or at least me sound old saying this, but I just think that's weird. I think it's odd. But that seems so normal. And if they heard me say this, they just make fun of me. I said, I don't understand that. I don't get that. But that, you guys probably see it, right? With that just is a normal way people communicate now that I don't fully grasp. And I wonder the long-term ramifications of taking the picture of the side of your face 60 times in a day. Is that healthy? Like, I don't know. I don't know if it doesn't feel like it is. So that's, I don't know if that has anything to do with coaching, but maybe that's just the culture or society that's become so normalized now that I have concerns with.
Well, and not only that, but I've got 2 young daughters as well. And then you start to think, is this a status check-in 60 times a day? Am I okay? Does everyone still accept me? Is this funny? Am I, and that doesn't sound very healthy either. So, and unfortunately, sometimes when you have young kids and the world's changing so fast, it feels like our kids are the guinea pigs, and we're not going to find out what the long-term effects are, and until they're in their 20s or whatever it may be. So I can relate with a lot of that for sure. I got 2 more for you real quick here, and I know these probably could be podcast episodes in and of themselves, but one of the issues that we see a lot with our athletes and also with our coaches is players and coaches that go through a crisis of confidence. I know we could, again, probably do a dissertation on how to build and maintain confidence, but you know as well as I do in the performance industry that there are times where our confidence and our sense of self-worth and our abilities, they crater, right? Whether it's following failure or it's just a questioning of ourselves, or the imposter syndrome narrative starts going in our mind. How do you try to encourage leaders when you find somebody that is really dealing with a crisis in confidence?
So, to me, I think confidence needs evidence. And evidence is created by action. Alex Hormozzi, his great quote that I recently read, he said, "You don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. You have to outwork your self-doubt." And that's not the sexy answer. That's not always the fun answer. But to me, whenever I'm feeling imposter syndrome, or I'm feeling doubt, or I'm lacking confidence in something, it's because I haven't provided myself enough evidence. And the only way to provide evidence is to do it. I think it's really hard to be confident about something you haven't done. That's okay. Then you have to have the mindset of it's okay to potentially suck at this thing initially, but I'm going to be okay with maybe being embarrassed or not being great in order to get good at it. The only way to get good at something, my experience, is you got to do it over and over and over. So to me, whenever I'm feeling that, I'll literally say to myself, we got to create some evidence. So, okay, I'm feeling imposter syndrome about going up on stage in front of 1,000 people, including I know a lot of people who I deem as far wiser than me, far older than me, whatever it may be. All right, well then let's go get some evidence. The only way to get evidence is to get up on a stage, to get up and do the thing, or to say, I've done this thing 250 times over the past 3 years. I've provided evidence. I'm ready to go. Let's go do this thing. That's just the reminder. So when you're feeling a crisis of confidence, it's either drawing from prior evidence or go get some. Go create some evidence right now by doing whatever the thing is. So the people who seem to have the most confidence are usually the most prepared, the ones who have worked on it. I'm much more confident for a test when I've studied a lot. I'm much more confident for a speech when I've practiced a lot. So whatever that thing may be, I'm better as a podcast host when I'm overly prepared. So then when it starts, I can just go. Whatever it is, I just think you got to create some evidence for yourself and then draw from that evidence.
And I think as we tried to build that into our programming with our kids, I took over a program that was 1 in 20 the year before I started here, that we had to begin with almost the character traits of we have the courage to try new
Yeah.
things, and so then we look back and say, well, we ran this differently, or we have these, new schemes or whatever, and they were really ugly and messy and maybe not very effective, but we took pride in the fact that we were courageous enough to make changes and try. And that in and of itself is a step toward building some of that confidence as well.
Love that. I love it, man. That's awesome.
All right, I got one more for you here, and I'm thinking about all of the conversations that you have, and I'm not asking you to go back through your notes of hundreds and hundreds of podcasts here, but you've made leadership kind of the focus of your study here in lots of different contexts. What has surprised you about what you found about really high functioning leaders? Was there anything that you just didn't expect that seems to be a common characteristic of people that you've been studying and talking to?
Probably when I started, I still had the old visions of the leader who needed to stand tall and have this grand vision and have every single answer and not have show any type of weakness or vulnerability. And as I've done this 500 plus times over 8 years, realize that curiosity and humility and vulnerability and being transparent and real seem to work really well to move people. Jim Collins told me leadership is the art of getting people to want to do what must be done, and those qualities seem to get people to want to do what must be done more so than maybe I would have thought, or than I did think at the beginning of this almost a decade ago. So I think I just had an old school looking approach early on, and then 500 plus conversations later, it's been updated, that I realized that maybe I was wrong. There were parts of it that were right, but I was wrong that, like, yes, there are times when you got to kind of pull back the curtain, and you got to be vulnerable, and you certainly have to be humble. And I don't know if I thought any of those things initially when I started my show, and now I've seen that just over and over and over, where people have proven that that's been effective. That's what I think I've tried to embody myself too when I'm leading.
In your book, Pursuit of Excellence, which I encourage coaches to check out, a lot of it is talking about certain disciplines, things that people do in that pursuit. And I'm going to ask you a tough question. And I say it's tough because I have no idea what I would give for the answer to this question. But if you had to give up all your own, all the personal disciplines, the rituals that you might do in your life, exercise or all those things, meditation, I don't know what yours are. What is the one that you could not do without? Like, what discipline would you hold on to the most? What is so foundational for you?
I think I have to physically move my body 7 days a week. That's the first thing I do every day. I mean, I spend time reading a little bit before that, and stretching and hydrating, but then I have to move my body every day. Like, that sets up everything. And I think we get one body, and anything can happen. I know that I've seen that. It's unfortunate to see some of the horrible things that can happen, even for people who are in perfect shape, or what seems like it. But in my mind, I just want to try to do everything I can to give myself the best chance to be healthy. And so to me, I think my physical practice of lifting heavy weights and running both long and short and slow and fast and walking up hills and climbing mountains, that is the thing that I just could never give up. I mean, I would hate to give up the other things, but if I'm forced to, like, give everything else up, I think having a physical practice impacts so many other elements of my life mentally that I couldn't ever give that up. And so to me, it's an everyday thing. I do not take days off. That may be wrong, but for me mentally, it's an everyday thing. And I feel like it just kind of sets the tone for the day to physically do hard things, to then mentally be in a better place moving forward for the remainder of the day. I feel like you win that morning with something physically hard. It sets me up mentally for the rest of the day. So I think that's kind of like the catalyst for everything else in my life. And on top of that, I hope it's giving me a chance to just be healthier longer. That's really important to me too. So I'm just trying to, again, increase the odds as much as I can.
Okay, that's it for our conversation with Ryan. To learn more about him, go to learningleader.com. You can also get his latest book, The Pursuit of Excellence, on Amazon. I happen to listen to it on Audible. Now, before you get out of here, I just want to remind you, you are going to want to subscribe to this podcast. We have so many great episodes coming up. Some huge, huge, huge guests in the world of coaching that you're not going to want to miss. So be sure to subscribe. And in the meantime, please take time to leave a review of the podcast if you feel it's worth that rating. And also share episodes if you think they could be of value to others.